Engineers have to be exposed to customer problems as soon as we know about them and as soon as we learn new things about them.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Summer of Atlassian 4.0. Today I'm talking with Axel from Atlassian, and it's been a year. It's been a year since I've been trying to talk with Axel, and we finally our stars have finally aligned. And so, Axel, welcome to the show, and
Thank
thank you for
you.
being here. We're here to talk about you, and we're here to talk about your role and your view of the world, and I'm very interested because you've been at Atlassian for a little over a year now.
Hmm.
And product is kind of your name. Product is your game. And I wanted to start off with product discovery. I think this is one of the products that you mostly speak about, right? The one that you spend the most amount of time in. And kind of just have a conversation into how JPD plays a role in the role of Atlassian, specifically with between engineering teams and product teams. And the very first question I want to get into is ideas versus initiatives. Have
Yeah.
you what kind of thought process do you guys have there? Because when I'm using Jira Product Discovery and when I'm working with engineering teams, that's usually the
Hmm.
first struggle. It's like, okay, so we have an intake, Jira Product
Yeah.
Discovery. Things come in as an
Yeah.
idea. We love the insights. We love all the things that we can do from a subjective perspective in Jira
Yeah.
Product Discovery. But how does that translate into Jira? So we usually I have a struggle there. What are you guys
Yeah.
thinking internally? Like what was the idea there?
So just before I answer this, what is the struggle you have
So
between?
so the struggles are at the hierarchy, right? Because I feel like the idea from JPD
Mhm.
clashes with like an initiative in Jira
Oh,
because
right, right, right,
it's really good to have the idea to be the parent of then the epics, right? Because you have a really great
right.
delivery section, but
Yeah.
JPD does not play well with Jira Plans,
Right. I see what you
right?
mean.
And
Yeah.
so from a hierarchical perspective, we want to see a roll up, right? We have this idea that we've authored and we've crafted in JPD, but we want to see the delivery downstream, but there's nuances in the delivery, right?
Yeah, correct.
And but just not being able to see it now back over on the plan kind of hurts with the strategy part. And so just kind of curious, like, have you guys thought about, have you even run into that use case? Like,
Yeah, 100%.
or
We
or
think
what
about it all the
what is the
time.
recommended way to get those two teams to talk to each other and have the hierarchy visible?
I think there are multiple topics there. The first one is around practices. So, how are teams operating across this stream of work? Which is like, I don't see this as there is discovery, then there is delivery. It's a constant stream of work, and
Mm,
I don't expect like teams to be handing over the work like from one to the other. It's more about how do you link the work or connect the work in a way that makes it visible both upstream and downstream to the team in its broader sense. So it might be somebody in design, might be somebody in marketing, might be a developer, might be a program manager, regardless of where they sit in the organization, basically. So at a basic level, one of the things we've recognized, which is both based on our recommendation and usage, is that most teams will have an idea sit at a granularity level which is consistent with what is going to transform later on as an epic, right? So a body of work that has multiple stories attached to it. This might not be true of every team,
right.
but there's a form of consensus that an idea. So the way we like to think about it is we have this framework internally that we call boulders, rocks, and pebbles.
Mm.
So
The
boulders are,
EOS, right?
there you go. So boulders are large um, bodies of work, large themes or buckets that could be a new product or a new part of a product. It's usually a large investment, and this with a large investment comes a lot of uncertainty as well.
Right.
So through the discovery phase, that boulder is going to transform into maybe multiple epics, maybe an initiative, right? And then you have rocks, and rocks are things like a new feature, and a new feature is very likely to transform into an epic or be linked at that level. And then you have pebbles. Pebbles are typically improvements. So an example of this could be we think there's inconsistency in the way we show a table. The borders are not the right borders everywhere. We need to improve the CSS
Yeah.
in this UI. That's a pebble. We don't prioritize these. These are things that we know we need to do. So the teams just pick them up along the way. So pebbles usually translate to tasks, and teams just do them. So now, while you have that like one-to-one mapping, a lot of things that we work on don't necessarily exactly fit into these buckets, and we are very conscious of that. An example of this is so recently, 10 days ago, or sorry, 7 days, a week ago, we did a silent launch of Premium.
Yeah.
So with that comes new features like hierarchies, etc. One of the reasons why we brought this idea of hierarchies in Jira Product Discovery is our customers kept asking us. This is our most requested feature. They kept asking us, "How can I visualize how work ladders up in larger items?" So there's a vertical relationship, which is like in the Jira Product Discovery team, we have this thing we call bets. So bets are things that we are
Your North Star almost,
opinionated
right?
about. We think, yeah, we think is going to have a large impact, right?
Yeah.
But we are yet to do the work to figure out whether it's actually going to happen. But they are usually large investments. To bets, we link solutions, which are solutions we've explored to address this bet or to solve a problem behind this bet. And further down, we have another thing we call iterations. And iterations are I'm going to ship milestone 1 of this solution, and then milestone 2 of this solution, and then milestone 3 of this solution, right?
Yeah.
So similarly, at that level, you can imagine how the mapping would be done across programs,
Right.
initiatives, epics, stories. But long story short, my message is there is not one way of doing this. A lot of teams will, depending on like how they manage their programs and how they manage these bodies of work, will choose to do it differently. It's just that we found that most teams will actually map an idea to an epic.
Yeah, and that's so first, very insightful what we just said, because I spent a lot of time noodling on this, but documentation is not always available, right? And it's I always tell leads, or because when I'm chatting with like CTOs or something where we're architecting what this should look like, I'm like, beauty is in the eye of the beholder, but they don't really like that answer because
Yeah,
they
yeah,
kind
yeah.
of want something more structured, more like what's the best practice. And I really,
A
really,
recommended
yeah,
approach.
I really like the way you described it right now, because I too, with one of my teams, I've been working in that EOS model with boulders, rocks, and pebbles, and I think that translates really, really well. I guess where I mean, so many different things to go there from there, but you said something interesting there at the end that I kind of want to bring up with respect to AHA, which may or may not
Mm-hmm.
be one of your competing tools, right? And when I worked out of AHA, when I was a technical program manager in a previous lifetime, so kind of sat between the product team and the technical teams, right? And that was our operation, right? It was AHA kind of was the idea phase, figure out, is this something feasible? What's the voice of the customer look like? What do they want from the world or from us? What does the world want from us? And then things would directly translate to an epic. And I don't know why I went from that. Because I always see the idea to be a little bit higher, because kind of what you were saying with the bets, right? Because the new variable is like goals, right? Like, so now how do we throw goals in with the bet
Yes,
and the
you're
correlation,
absolutely
and
right.
and I think Atlassian, not to tell you how to do your job, right? But I think Atlassian,
Oh no, please tell us. It's not so much about telling us how to do our jobs. It's sharing insights from the front lines because you
yeah,
are using the product. So we need to
right.
understand what's working and what's not
I
working.
think, yeah, because I think what would go a long way is like a recommend, not even a recommend, because I know Atlassian doesn't typically do recommendations, right? But I think it would be interesting to see like, here's our system of work, how we envision it, because I think a lot of people are starting to buy into the system of work mentality, but the theory of it is much easier to do than the execution of it. So when I have to go down to the ground level and go, okay, so how does system of work actually roll out across a company that's not just technical? Now we got marketing and design and HR. They don't care about epics. They don't care about tasks. So we got to redesign some of these things, and getting into those details. It's kind of like, let's try something and see what sticks.
So it's so funny that you mentioned this, and I think you're gonna love this. So when was this? I think last summer, so June, almost a year ago. Um, so I had joined in January, and one of the big ideas behind we didn't talk about my role, but it's a really interesting role at Atlassian because there's not a lot of us that do it. First of all, and it's very external facing, and it's a huge opportunity to influence the craft based on where you sit in the organization. If you're doing this role of evangelism, you get to influence and shape how the craft evolves in the industry. So part of the reason behind hiring me was we need to communicate clearly with intention that we want to serve this persona that we call product managers. Because, sure, there are a lot of product managers across Atlassian products. Most of them spend time in Jira, but Jira is, before anything else, a tool for engineering teams. If you think about it historically,
Yeah.
before we
I,
made
I
the
I think of it as an execution tool, right? It's where
correct,
you go to get it done,
correct.
but you
So
got to figure out what it is first.
you got to figure out what it is. And historically, it's been very engineering, R&D, IT heavy, right? So as we make the transition to Jira for all teams, now that's changing. But if you think about even me, I've got about 13 years experience now in product management. Most companies where I worked at before, I was in Jira because that's where we were tracking the work. That's not where we were doing the strategy. That's not where we were doing the planning. And we were missing this place, this space left of Jira where we could actually do this as product managers outside of a spreadsheet, because a
Right.
spreadsheet is by default where you do anything if you don't have a purpose built solution for it, right? So one of the things we realized very quickly is this idea of opinionated software, right? Like companies want to hire a tool, they want to hire a solution to solve a problem, but they one thing they even want more is an opinionated view of how the tool should solve the problem, right? This is exactly what we did in Jira Product Discovery. So last summer, Tanguy, our head of product, and myself, we wrote Atlassian's Product Discovery Handbook, which is basically a guide for product teams for how to do best in class product management based on our learnings internally at Atlassian and based on what we see in the industry as being best practices. So if
Yeah.
you read this handbook, there's about 120 pages where we basically talk about what is the problem in the industry right now across prioritization, road mapping, capturing all of your information in a single place. Um, what is our view of how it's best done? What is the industry's view of what's it's best done? Uh, and then if you were to do this using our tools, this is what it looks like. So exactly what you have here on
Yeah.
screen.
Yeah, this has been on my tabs for a few weeks now, and something that I've been trying to dig deeper into, but because exactly what you're describing is very interesting to me, especially in the role that I play outside of Atlassian.
And we've had incredible feedback off the back of writing this, because people are not necessarily looking for what I would call a guide, which is like how to show me how to do this or
Right.
how to do that. What they're really interested in is, why should I be doing it this way versus this other way, which is all this handbook does. It's really explain what is the importance of doing something in a specific way, and we share our point of view.
Yeah, because this is right. I've been using right here. So when I come into a consultation for helping companies, I come here, right? Because a lot of companies think in goals. Everybody's got a goal,
Yeah.
but things kind of quickly fall apart there because we got to take that goal, but there's so many, like, everybody wants to boil the ocean. There's so many ideas, but
Yeah.
you can't solve every problem, right? You can't end world hunger. And so I'm like, you gotta be focused. And so where do we go to focus? And I'm like, well, that's where JPD really shines, right? Because Jira is very not subjective. You got to build it in, right? You got to build in the subjectiveness into Jira. But JPD is very subjective out of the gate. Like, you can add context, you can add that insight, right? You can add these ratings, these um I don't know, scores, really, where
Yeah.
people can say, I like this idea, or I don't like this idea, or I kind of like this idea. But in Jira, it's very black and white. Once it makes it into Jira, it's very black and white. And that's what we want, right? We want
Correct.
engineers to be operating off of a black and white environment. We don't want the engineers to kind of be playing a guessing game at that point.
Yeah, no, 100%. Let me share this really quickly, and maybe this is going to help. I'm trying to share my screen here.
Yeah, there we
Can
go.
you
On
see
to that.
this?
Yes.
Right. So this is how we like to think about it. So you've got exactly like you said, you've got this goal, in a company, which is like, yeah, I want to go from a 0 to 100 enterprise customers by the end of the financial year. You have a status for this goal. And then once you have this goal, you've got to organize your work in a way that allows you to hit this goal and have impact, right? And one of the things we talk a lot about is the differentiation between different backlogs. So we have a delivery backlog, which is Jira, and then you have a product backlog, which is Jira Product Discovery. In Jira Product Discovery, you have these ideas, and ideas can be problems to solve, they can be experiments, they can be solutions, they can be features. It really depends on how
It's
you're
an
using the
opportunity.
product
It's an opportunity to
or an
spend money.
opportunity. Correct. But at the end of the day, you have this container that allows you to basically mature this idea over time based on what you learn. This is where we talk about evidence based decision making, and we talk about insights. So insights are pieces of evidence that are telling you I should be or I should not be prioritizing this idea, and you can enrich that context from either the other apps in the Atlassian system of work like Confluence and Jira Service Management, but also third-party tools like Figma, Salesforce, Miro, etc., etc.
Right.
So the interesting language we hear customers use when they talk about Jira Product Discovery is they often say, so they will mention things like single source of truth or product operating system or product hub or product home. So basically, it's this place where I can go to manage everything that has to do with product, which is centralizing all the ideas in one place, prioritizing these ideas, and then communicating what the outcome of that prioritization is, which
Yeah.
is basically your roadmap. And the interesting thing across all of that is the this is something we like to say as a product manager. 80% of your job is being a cat herder, really. You're trying to align people on what we should be doing and why, right? And Jira Product Discovery offers the space to do that.
Yeah, and that makes sense. But now, see, so going back to your picture here, right? This is kind of where things get interesting because I wholeheartedly agree and embrace this. But you said something key, right? My stakeholders want to see it in one location.
Yeah.
But that's where I start tripping because I now go to plans to
Yeah.
be that central location. But that idea
Mhm.
doesn't come over, at least not today.
It does. You have a JPD and plans integration now. I don't know if you've seen it.
Probably
It
not.
allows you to bring ideas into plans and to show how they are related to other work items that you have in your
Yeah,
plans,
because
right?
that's
So,
the part that I've been missing then. Because when
yeah,
you guys
let me
came up
show
with the
you.
delivery, when you came up with that delivery section first, that was game changer
Yeah.
for me, right? Because it used to be that the idea existed and then Jira existed. But when that
Hmm.
delivery tab magically appeared in JPD one day, I'm like, this is what we needed. We needed that correlation because back then it was you would link it. Like version one, when I first jumped into the JPD scene, you linked an idea to a story and that was it. Like you had the handshake, but you didn't have the visibility. But then the delivery tab kind of made it like, okay, so now I can see that progress bar. Because the question
Hmm.
I'm always asked, right, from an executive perspective is, what's on our roadmap, right? What are we trying to
Yeah.
deliver, and by when?
Yeah.
right? And where are we? Like, what's the status of that delivery? And
Yeah.
that becomes a very hard story to tell when you have all these different tools and data's in different places, metrics, right? Jira, now I can't show the idea in Jira software in a regular dashboard to show that progress. And I got to go to JPD to get this progress bar because I
Uh-huh.
want, like, my executive wants to see that progress bar in purple. Right, but we also need to
Yeah.
see all the nuances of that downstream, right? What epics are blocked,
So
what
that's
tasks are stuck.
super interesting that you mentioned this, because I think that's one of the reasons why um, we really thought about so the main, I would probably say, like, the main idea behind Jira Product Discovery is, how do you set up the conversations you're meant to have with different stakeholder groups for success, right? How do I speak to my program managers? How do I speak to the VP of product or the chief product officer? How do I speak to my team? We often talk about this concept of altitudes. I don't know if you've heard us talking about this before.
I
So
don't think I
let me
have.
show you this quickly. Basically, this is, at you won't necessarily tell the same story based on where you are in terms of altitude in the organization. So let me bring this up. Um, Bear with me.
Yeah, no, and I think it's an important conversation to have because a follow up question that I have for you is,
Hmm.
you come in with the best intentions with an idea, right? That is
Yeah,
what you think you want at that time from what you're hearing from your customer. Awesome,
yeah,
but oftentimes, and to quote the late Steve Jobs, your customer doesn't know what they want until you show it to them.
yeah.
So you kind of have to build something, but you can't just build anything. Like, you have to have some sense of direction. Otherwise, your team will wander with an A,
100%.
right? And
So
so yeah, so it's an interesting idea that I want to talk to you about. Like, what happens then with the push and the pull? Because sometimes your customer wants something, or at least you think you want at least you think your customer wants something. But then, is it engineering, from an engineering perspective? Is it technically feasible? Like, what? So, but we'll get into that in a second.
yeah, no, 100%. I think these are all really great topics, but going back to, like, how do you speak to, your execs versus the program managers versus the team, etc. So we have this idea of altitudes, right? So for each of these altitudes, the person consuming the artifact that you're producing in a view might be a roadmap, for example. They're not necessarily looking for the same thing. A product leader is looking at a business line. They are concerned about levels of investment primarily. A product manager is looking at a product area. They are concerned about what are the teams focusing on right now and what are they going to tackle next. And at the team level, they're currently working on a solution right now. So they're closer to what is happening right now. And this pretty much means they are not interested in the same thing. These three personas are not interested in the same thing. So why am I mentioning this? It's the whole idea behind Jira Product Discovery is that you can have different views for these types of conversations. So same list of ideas, but you'll slice and dice them based on what is the story that you want to tell. As an example, you can see this is a view for prioritization, and I'm using rice, and I can see how ideas are tied to goals. And I can do some estimations. I can talk about job size for each of these ideas. At this level, I'm probably at the team level and doing this collaboratively as a team, looking at ideas and thinking, what do we think of these ideas? How do we stack rank them based on job size, team size, which goals they're linked to, et cetera, et cetera. But if you're a leader, you probably want to understand, what is the team going to invest in strategically across different investment buckets, or across different time horizons, or across different jobs to be done, et cetera, et cetera. So if I don't know if I have a view here, but let me show you how we do this in our Jira Product Discovery project for the Jira Product Discovery team. Actually, let me do this. So this is our JPD roadmap. Can you see the view here?
Yeah, we can see good enough where we can't see anything, so that's perfect.
Okay, so Um, these are what we focus on. So you can see on the top here, we have themes. Growth is a theme.
Mhm.
Jobs to be done is a theme. Engineering foundation is a theme. The things that you see at the top here with this little icon are bets. These bets are linked to solutions, and these solutions are associated to horizons here, right? So you can see in jobs to be done bucket, we have product management jobs to be done. And the solutions we are building for this is product hierarchies, cross project views, dependency management, blah, blah, blah. Right.
Mhm.
So if you are Matt Schwimmer, who is our SVP of product for Agile and DevOps, so the big boss of Agile and DevOps, basically, this level of information is probably what you need. You don't need more than this. You can see what the teams are working on, where are they focusing on next, how does that how is that organized across these investment buckets.
Yeah.
Now, if you're at a team level, so you can see in product management jobs to be done, there are teams working on hierarchies and cross project views roadmaps. So if I go down to Aurora, for example, here, I can see they are working on cross project views roadmaps, and I can see that they have iterations for this particular feature, and they have milestone one, which is done. They are currently working on milestone two, and then they'll work on milestone three. And this is linked to the bet product management jobs to be done. So now I'm at the team altitude, right? So when you talk about this idea of executive dashboard or how you communicate direction of travel, provide directional clarity to different types of audiences, this is why we give the flexibility in JPD to create as many views as you want, to slice and dice the same information, which all sits here. All of this stuff is just
Right.
a list of ideas, right?
That is super interesting because that solves a lot of problems at one level, right? Now, let's get a little deeper, right? Let's assume that we take one of these ideas and we're like, okay, we're working on this. This is the iteration we're going to be working on it. That ultimately translates at the end of the day down to a task in Jira, right?
Yeah.
And now Jira is a very very is a strong word nowadays, but Jira was intent. I guess the original. I don't even know how to. We're in such a weird spot with this new transition of the new Jira. I don't want to say the word agile, but traditionally, right?
Don't say the word agile. No, I'm kidding.
Traditionally, we work in an agile way, right? Where we
Yeah.
do so we take that iteration, but now we got to put it into an actual sprint, right? And so we have a backlog that needs to be prioritized, and at that level in JPD, I think still the devil's in the details, and you still don't have enough details to know
Yeah.
what's up, right? And so it's not until your technical teams jump into it, and technical again is a
Yeah.
strong word, but it's not until the person who's actually going to do the work looks at the thing
Yeah.
and goes, okay, here's what's going to happen, right? And so the reality of an expectation from an idea down to, okay, so what are we doing? There can be a lot of telephone gaming playing, right? Like requirements can
Hmm.
change, requirements can shift, expectations can shift, priorities
Yeah.
can shift. And so how
Yeah.
do you deal with life then at that point?
Before we go down that road, this is I'm going back to the product discovery handbook and our opinionated view on why we should be doing certain things. So if I open this again, um, we talk here a lot about collaboration. So we talk about the
And
fact that
collaboration is a
prioritization,
consistent thing that happens daily, not just once a month or once a quarter.
correct.
And I
So
think
talk
that's why a
about
lot of people
prioritization.
most people miss that fact too, right? Most people, when I at the beginning, I said a word that I don't think you liked, right? And I said you toss it over, but I see that in the industry, right? I see
Oh,
somebody take an idea and
I
you
don't.
literally toss it over.
Yeah, you don't. I don't like it because it
You
is
shouldn't do
not
it,
my view of the world, but
right?
I'm very conscious that this is still how most companies operate because I've been there. In most teams that I worked at, there was this culture of engineering is here to execute, right? They are not here to participate in strategy. They're not here to participate in research, et cetera, which I do not adhere to. And this is why this handbook is extremely powerful because we are also trying to convey our values and our ways of working, how we recommend companies do this. So, why am I talking about this right now? So, in the prioritization section, we talk a lot in detail about how teams can come together and collaborate, especially technical teams with product. So you will notice at Atlassian, we have a very strong product engineering culture, which is engineers that are really involved in how we build product. It's not just a product manager handing over technical work to you and then you take it across the line. That's not how we think about it, right?
Right. And
Now,
that's the right way to think about it because it's a dialogue. It's an ongoing dialogue
correct.
that could happen.
So why am I mentioning this? Let me go back to Jira Product Discovery here for a second. So just this week, we did a webinar on how we build hierarchies for JPD with our head of product, our head of design, and one of our senior software engineers. And we talk a lot about this concept of a product trio. And in the product trio, so you usually have this representation, PM, design, tech. And something that is extremely important in the way that these three crafts collaborate is that engineers have to be exposed to customer problems as soon as we know about them and as soon as we learn new things about them, right? So in our teams, we don't think an engineer's role is just to sit behind a screen and produce code. We think their role is to participate in user research. We think their role is to try and understand as soon as possible what are the nuances in the jobs to be done that we are trying to address. They participate in very early stage prototyping. They lead technical spikes. So through all the process from ideation to shipping something, they are constantly present. They don't show up for the last mile of the show, right? That is not how we think about this. That's really important.
What about so I've been in situations where engineering goes off and builds something, but then the product team comes in at the end and goes yay or nay, but I feel like that's too late.
Where is this happening? I'm
You'd be
curious.
surprised.
Genuinely.
Every company I've ever worked at, right? Again, maybe this is why I'm a little bit more jaded in my views, right? Because I speak from my personal opinions of the places I worked at, and it's this concept of like, okay, here's an epic or here's an idea. It
Yeah.
gets bought
Yeah.
off. It gets prioritized into a quarter. Engineers,
Yeah.
software leads come in and go, okay, we get you, we see you. We're gonna go build all these functionality into our platform, into our product. They go forth and they backlog, make a bunch of stories. Those get put into sprints, right? And then they plan the sprint, and then a lot of it has changed by the time it gets down to the engineer. And then the product
100%.
manager comes back at the end of that at that demo and goes like, "What the heck did you build? This is not what I asked for." And
Correct.
I'm
So
like, "Well,
this
where were you the last
everything
month?"
everything you just described is what we call project management. And one of the biggest things that is happening right now is a lot of companies, especially any company that is anything from mid market to large enterprise right now, a lot of them are thinking about uh, either thinking about or in the middle of their project to product transformation. You'll hear a lot of people talking
I've
about
heard of that project
moving
to
to the
product.
product operating model,
Yeah,
right? So everything I've been describing to you since the start of this conversation is based on the understanding that you are working in the product model or your intention is to work in the product model. So there's nothing fundamentally wrong with what you just described. It's just, I don't think that's
it's
product
a different
management. I think
model.
that's
Yeah,
project management.
yeah, and I think that is a cultural shift too, right? Because I don't know that enough people know about the product model. Let me scratch that. I do think a lot of people know about the product model, but I don't think enough people have seen the product model work well or have a
Mhm.
working example of how to model it because it's a good concept. I have read what's his name's book of project to product. The
Yeah.
IBM or not the BMW guy that went to the BMW
Yeah. Yeah.
facility and see. But it's a good idea, it's a good concept, but you still have this culture of spreadsheets, right? At the end of the day, you still have these executives, you still have these decision makers, these powerful decision makers that expect to see the world in a very specific way, and it's dollars and timelines, right? It's how much has this costing me? How much over budget are we? And how much over committed are we? And how much over schedule are we? And none of these tools, not Jira, never helps me answer those questions.
I'm going to pause here because you just said something I find interesting.
I
And
say a
I'm
lot of
actually
stuff.
writing, I'm actually writing a post about this,
I say a lot of stuff, Axel.
which is like this thing I like to call transformation theater, right?
Okay.
So you just talked about timelines. There's a lot to be said about timelines, right? Have you ever worked in a company or in a team where you planned a date where something was going to be shipped and actually met that date?
No, never.
Never happens. You
Never.
know it. I know it. All the leaders know it. Everybody knows it. What do? We keep doing this stuff. We do the same thing on and on and on again, over and over again. This is where I think we need to step back and be intellectually honest about something that is fundamentally broken down in the industry. This is true. Like everywhere you go, people still do this, and it makes no sense. As an example, and this is something people really need to understand in the product model, we understand there are commitments to be made, and at some point, there needs to be a contract between teams. This is what we call high integrity commitments. High integrity commitments are not the rule, they are the exception. Why? Because for you to be able to have a high integrity commitment, it means you know which problem you're solving. You know how you're going to solve it because you've done the discovery, extended discovery. You know precisely what is the problem, how you're going to solve it, and you've done the technical spikes to even understand from a technical perspective and from a feasibility perspective, if we were to solve the problem and build a solution, what does that solution look like? And what is our level of confidence in solving it in this particular way? So at this point, you've done so much work that the only thing that is remaining for you to do is to actually start coding, right? This
Right.
is only when you can actually have a high integrity commitment. But what do we do in the industry? We haven't even started thinking about a problem. We already have a date for when we're going to ship it.
And a
How,
potential
how
solution.
does that, like, please tell me, how does that even
It
work?
doesn't. It doesn't. That's why you that leads to missed expectations because you came in with a false sense of reality to begin with.
But this
And
false sense of reality is pervasive. It has
but
made
then
its way to every
right.
single company.
But then you blame it on Agile, you blame it on the Scrum Master, you blame it on everything else except yourself.
But these are all things we made up.
Yeah.
Like we made Agile up. We made Lean up. All of this stuff we made up,
Yeah,
right?
that's why I'm a huge proponent of make it make sense, right?
Yeah.
I worked on a team where we kind of tossed all those concepts out the door, and we
Yeah.
said, "What's broken? How do we fix
Yes.
it? Like from a technical perspective, right? Like what? Why can this aircraft not fly? I'm from the defense industry, right? And so we came down to like, why can we not get the wheels off the ground? And we came up with every bug, every problem, and we said, okay, we're gonna execute on that to deliver on that, and it's hard because it requires, like you said, a high level of commitment, and you got to have skin in the game, which I think is a different cultural topic that we could probably have another hour on, right? Because I feel like with outsourced of labor and things of that nature, it's hard to get folks to commit when to them it's just a job, right? It's not.
It's what we call a culture of mercenaries versus a culture of missionaries.
Right. That's so beautifully put because you need people that buy into the mission and to the vision. But what I often see is that the executive at the top doesn't do a good job at setting forth that purpose. Right? They don't do a good job at setting the mission and the vision because they're so busy, I don't know, doing what? Because I feel like if an executive took 5 minutes to guide their team and go, this is where we want to go, this is our North Star, then the rest kind of falls into place because people will go above and beyond to move the mountain.
I will tell you something I think is super interesting just off what you just said. In a lot of companies right now, there are things that are happening at the high altitudes in the company that are completely out of your control span. Your leaders not giving you directional clarity sincerely is not great, but apart from
Yeah.
providing feedback, there is really nothing you can do about it.
Yeah, but it's a harsh reality of the environment you're in.
I empathize. I'm not
Yeah.
saying, you know, what I'm trying to say is there is no point focusing on things that are outside of your control span. I would recommend teams and individuals in these teams to focus on what they can change. As an example, I meet with a lot of teams that are all waiting for some huge big bang transformation to happen so they can finally work in the way they want to work. And when I ask them a question. I speak to a lot of product managers, and I'll be telling them, they will come to me and say, I want to spend time doing more discovery work and talking to customers and trying to understand what their problem is, etc., etc. And I'm, I look at them and I'm
Why,
like,
why don't you?
why? Like, okay, so number one, you're telling me that you're not doing these things today? So huge red flag, and I understand where it comes from, but I'm also playing this role to show them how what as a mirror to what they just shared with me, right? I'm like, oh, you're not doing this today. Okay. Why? What are you doing? And then they share this list of things that have nothing to do with product management, but have a lot to do with project management, right?
Right.
And the first thing I tell them is, of the list of things you just told me you would really like to do, what is stopping you from doing it? Like, what is stopping you from reaching out to a customer? They will sometimes tell me something like, I don't have access, and I'll be like, are you on LinkedIn, the largest professional network on the planet, over 2 billion
No, but
people?
but it is a
Like,
cultural thing, Axel. Like I've gotten
yes, no, no, but
scolded.
I know. But what I'm trying to say is, you cannot blame culture for everything, because at the end of the day,
You have to
you
have the
as a
drive.
human being have agency. Like you know what I mean?
You were
Like,
not a slave. Yeah, you're not a
you
slave.
exist in the world.
Yeah.
You have limbs, you have a brain, and I understand that the environment, everything in your environment might be telling you don't
Don't.
do this, or might not be setting you up for success. But if what you believe is the right thing is to speak to customers and learn from them and translate that into opportunities you can solve and help them progress in their workflows, and that there is literally nothing stopping you from doing it, why aren't you doing it?
And a very clear um indicator of an Atlassian goal that I absolutely love, right? You got to be the change that you seek.
It's a
And
core value, correct?
yeah, and I love how this is the thing where, and I know we're out of time, so I want to be very mindful of your time here. But real quickly, and hopefully I don't end you in a cliffhanger.
No,
but
no, we can overflow a little bit. That's fine.
okay, yeah. So the concept, right? The struggle that I have is, and this is something maybe I want to do. Back to the chief Atlassian, is I get Atlassian's empowering teams, right? I see so much potential with the teamwork graph. I see so much potential with Rovo and all the cool stuff and system of work and all the products that Anu announced on stage and their interoperability, right? I get it and I see the vision. I don't see how companies get there because I feel like until you actually lay out a step-by-step plan, most companies, have you seen A Bug's Life, the 1998 movie when the
Yeah,
leaf falls and
yeah,
the
yeah, yeah.
I feel like that's corporate America, right? Or corporate. I know you're not in America, but that's corporate
Oh,
life, right?
I know all too much about corporate
Yeah,
America.
yeah. So the corporate America's that leaf, right? That leaf falls on that trail of ants, and like all of a sudden they're freaking out. They're like, "What do we do? How do we do this?" And the guy's like, "You go around the leaf." But I feel like you need somebody, and I don't know that it's Atlassian's role to sit there and
Mm,
go, "You got to go around the leaf," but
yeah.
somebody's not picking that position up, telling them how to go around the leaf, and the leaf stops them. And the leaf obviously is a metaphor for anything, right? Like the
This
moment something
is
doesn't go as you have it like the plan that you have, the step by steps, companies come to a halt and they're like, I don't know what to do.
I love that you're bringing this up, and very frankly, this is why I'm at Atlassian today. This is the foundation for my role, which is 100% focused on practices and ways of working. Right. That's why I'm here, and it's basically all I'm focusing on.
Yeah.
It's the belief that while we sell great products and solutions, we know that teams can only be successful if they adopt the right ways of working and practices on top of the solutions, right? If you have a team tomorrow and they start using Jira and they start doing all kinds of things in there that, kind of don't make sense for people like you and I, then the chances of being successful in the long term are pretty limited, right? And it's great that you ask, like, Is this our role? Do we have a role to play? I think we have a role to play. At scale, supporting over 100,000 customers in their transformation, very frankly, I'm not sure is our role to do, because a lot of this work around coaching and training and showing the ways of working is very professional services oriented, and it's not
Yeah.
scalable. So
And you
I
only
don't
have
know
one
that
Mark
as
Ruth in the world.
I, I don't know that as a company we want to do this. However, I will also recognize that um, we try to lean in for a lot of enterprise customers and the strategic customers with our advisory services team. So we have people skilled internally who can help in these transformations. And we rely heavily on our partner ecosystem. You know this because a lot of our partners have these professional services capabilities where they can, you know, do much more hand holding than we can on these topics. However, one thing where I think we can really influence, and I think we have a role to play, is being more opinionated and sharing how we think our solution should be adopted and how teams should be operating, which is why, as an example, we wrote this product discovery handbook. That's one example. This week, when we last week, sorry, when we did the product
Premier.
trio webinar, which was 1 hour with our head of product, head of design, and senior software developer, the aim behind it was to show how we work because we know it works for us and there might be some things for
Yeah.
our customers to learn from, right? We're not saying there's only one way of doing things. And this is also something that's super important when you mention in that transformation of ways of working, people need a recipe, they need a guide. I kind of half agree and half disagree there because there's also like playbooks can be quite dangerous.
Yeah, because
I don't
it
know if you've seen
pigeonholes you.
this, but
It pigeonholes you into
sorry.
one mindset. It pigeonholes you into a single mindset, which is
So
dangerous.
you and I spend a decent amount of time on LinkedIn, and I'm sure you've seen this trend where people left, right, and center are sharing cheat sheets about everything.
Right.
Cheat sheet for this, cheat sheet for everything is a cheat sheet. But if you step back and question yourself, like have you read anywhere a cheat sheet apart from an FPS game probably? Uh, have you used a cheat sheet before that has significantly changed how you operate in a team or how you do a job?
Not
I
necessarily
know it's
because
not true for
it you gotta go. I think to do what you need to do at an entry level, it's gotta be deep and it's gotta be tailored, right?
correct.
A generic concept or idea isn't gonna be what's gonna get you over the finish line, especially in an
And a
enterprise.
lot and a lot of the transformation work is not about technology. A lot of the transformation work is about people.
Mm.
And
But working with people is hard.
people is an ill-structured problem, right? So in the world, you have well-structured problems and ill-structured problems. People are an ill-structured problem. It's very hard to they come in all shapes and sizes. They come with different challenges. They come with different mindsets. So that transformation is tricky. I love doing transformation work because I can see the impact it has, but it's very tricky to do at scale. And it's very tricky to do with one recipe in mind because every single company has a very different operating context,
Yeah.
right?
But
So you can't just assume that what worked in company A is going to work in company B.
it
However, and I will close with that, I always like to say let's go back to first principles. So if you look at the foundations behind a lot of what we've been talking about around Atlassian system of work, for example, break it down to first principle. It's about visibility, transparency, collaboration, trust, experimentation, etc., etc. So these will remain true across. If we were imagine if we were a transformation company tomorrow, we would do this regardless of the customer, but how we execute that would be different, right? So I would urge people when they are looking at frameworks and playbooks to not take it at face value, but rather try and break it down to what is the first principle behind this recommendation that this playbook is saying I should follow, and maybe lean into the first principle more than the recipe, if that makes
right,
sense.
yeah. Now that makes total sense. And Axel, I know you and I could probably do a whole masterclass on this stuff. Um,
I love talking about this stuff.
this is one of the reasons why. So I know we're definitely out of time, but just real quickly. So on the Jira Life, we kind of have tried to have these conversations, but at the Jira admin level, and this is kind of why I have ATech a little separated out, because these are the kind of conversations that I'm trying to now provide insights on to my audience of like, because my audience, mostly everybody knows how to add a status to Jira at this point. But the real question is, should you add a status to Jira, and what status should you add?
Correct.
And that's the kind of insight I try to
Correct.
provide. So I'm definitely gonna noodle on this a little bit more, because you've inspired me to double down on something that I've been trying to figure out, how do I produce content around, because working with people is challenging. And so any opinion that I put out there, you're never gonna satisfy everybody. And it's a hard job to do if you don't have thick skin.
Yeah, but I'm with you, and I don't try to do that. For example, um, there are companies and teams that are extremely early, even pre transformation, who are not even interested in changing. So I don't speak to them because, quite
There's nothing to
frankly,
do.
I can't be everywhere, and I don't have the time for it, and I don't have the energy for it. So you have to have focus. Focus
Yeah.
is a big thing, right?
Yeah, so you gotta
If you
pick and
want to
choose
be
your battles,
impactful, you
right? Yeah.
got to pick your
No,
battles.
this is, yeah, you gotta pick and choose your battles, and you gotta see if the juice is worth the squeeze. But I definitely know we're definitely way over time. So Axel, thank you so much. We're gonna have to have like a
My
part two this
pleasure. This has
summer.
been a lovely conversation.
Yeah,
Thank you for
thank you
being a
so much.
brilliant
So
host.
we're gonna end it here, and then maybe we can pick it up later in the summer.
Let's do it.